we're going to be first starting with sort of a review of what the objectives are, what we're hoping to accomplish with the workshop today, and then we'll go ahead and go through an agenda on what the flow will be over the next 2 hours. So the objectives today for the workshop are to present the main results from the project and the work that has been happening over the last several years. We have a couple of different use cases that we're going to be putting the spotlight on and sharing what those experiences had been. One of those use cases is connected to the work going on with mobile DL, mobile driver licenses, and also there is a credit use case that we're also going to be taking a look at. Really, a big value in us coming together is to be able to talk about lessons that have come out of the work of the last several years, and how the things that we've learned through this experience have application that go beyond maybe just the use cases that we're going to be talking about. Certainly, it appears that is the case. We're going to also have an opportunity to talk about some of the new business opportunities that the work that the project has been working on helps to bring to light. And then at the end of our time together, we really want to use this coming together as an opportunity to have a conversation. And so we're going to be having a roundtable discussion where we encourage everybody to please participate, and whatever questions you might have about the project or about the presentations that you're going to be seeing, go ahead and put those into the chat. That will create a queue for us, and then we'll be having, as I said, a roundtable discussion at the end of the workshop. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it back over to Antonio, who will run through the agenda and will kick us off. Antonio?
Many thanks. Many thanks, Jeff. And I think many thanks for all the participants that already have come to this workshop. As already was said, this is what with this workshop a little bit we want to highlight not only the results of Olympus, but also the potential exploitability of the results. And that's why, as we already mentioned, although we are going to show you this result because it's something that you also need to understand, our main objective is that at the end we can receive feedback from your side in order to understand how do you feel the solution we are providing could help also to you, to your sector, to your business, or new ideas that you can bring where we can try to integrate on the general schema of our products and solution that we are bringing in identity management area in that sense. So basically, in order to reach that, as already you can see here on the agenda, I'm Tonis Karmetov, University of Murcia. I'm the project coordinator of this project, Horizon 2020, and I'm going to make you a very short overview of the main objective, high-level objective, and results of the project. Not going in detail. In case you need detail, obviously at the end we can discuss it, but also you will have a lot of information on the website. But here is more about just to understand the benefits, the advantage that we understand our solution can bring to your business or to your sectors, and in that sense. Then we will go to two demonstrators that we already have created. One about a mobile driver license, in that sense, that we're going to show you what is the objective, and you will see a demo about how it's working. And then another one associated to the credit file and a financial sector area, where you can also will see a demo about how we have integrated this on a solution already existing in one of our partners. Finally, my colleague from University of Murcia also will present you some approach and why we understand Olympus is quite relevant in this moment, because can be perfectly interact with what is eIDAS version 2, and could improve basically the solution that already exists in identity management for the authentication, authorization of services in that sense. And finally, I mean, more than the conclusion, the idea will be to create an open table and discussion in order to receive from you comments, suggestions, and I mean, possible idea, either if we can find business together, that will be perfectly right, I would say. But anyway, the main idea is, as I already said, to create an interactive discussion with you. So as already was mentioned, any comment, please, that you have during the presentation, just put it in the chat. And at the end, we can go back to them and discuss and make me provide you more detail in that sense. So saying that, just to mention that we are recording the session. So just for you to get notice about that, and we will make available the slides, the presentations, plus the record or the video of the session will be available as in the webpage of the project, and also through Cytale's video support as already has been provided previously for this workshop. Okay, so basically just to mention what is very shortly, what is Olympus about? Olympus is, as already mentioned, is an European project. It's been already, it's an innovation action. So basically we are not just doing research purely, but also innovation and really providing results, as you will see later. Where we are involved several partners, as you can see here, from Spain, Loyalty, and University of Murcia. We have IBM from Switzerland. We have Multiserve from Portugal, and we have Cytal from Sweden, and Alexandra Institute from Denmark. Basically, this project looks basically to three main issues to be provided. First, provide an innovative distributed technology for the identity management in order to increase and support the protection against, I would say, most of the identity threat that already exists, to provide and I would say extend the existing functionality on privacy preserving approach and the identity management, and how to make this interoperable with the existing solution. We are not creating a new complete separate ecosystem. We are just providing solutions that are being able to be integrated on existing, I would say, ecosystem on identity management. I think that this will be important to mention. And finally, we demonstrate this on the context of two use cases. But I mean, the two use cases are just examples, so are demonstrator of how this technology can be used. But certainly, as you will see later, it can be extended perfectly to other sectors, other business, and that's why also we want to receive your feedback about this interest. Here you can see basically the website. Later we will come again with the information about the link. So just to understand where we come from and why basically we try to create this solution based in Olympus. No? So in that sense, what we have tried to identify what are the disadvantage or the main blocking factor of the existing solution based on single sign-on mostly. So there's a lot of advantage. It is completely and globally used in that sense, because basically support and allow that the user in some sense don't need to have multiple passwords from different services, so they can use one way access, no, to all different kind of services. But this and this is why it's made so popular and it's been so used in different scenarios. What is the main disadvantage with this kind of a scenario? It's basically that you are relying in some sense on a central point that is the identity provider, that also can be a point of blocking in some kinds of a scenario. It can compromise because everything is being passing through the identity provider and can provide some tracking of your activity. Also because the user at the end are using one identity that is being shared over the different service provider, so they can collaborate in order to understand and better profiling you in some sense. So privacy is a little bit quite restricted, and in general, all these aspects are creating, I would say, a kind of a need to try to support solutions that are more friendly from the perspective of the privacy of the user, but at the same time can provide a better understanding or better support, no, to reduce this single point of failure, as you can see in this scenario. Okay, so based on that, what as already mentioned, our main vision on the objective of the project and the solution that we have provided is to try to provide several, I would say, support for different aspects of the privacy. And here I put some of them that most of you, maybe you notice. So we want to increase the unlinkability so that the user over the different interaction, they cannot be identified as the same user, to provide minimal disclosure in that sense. So to really provide the necessary information without providing other things that are not necessary in order to be provided the service. One important thing, and here comes kind of the name, the oblivious part. So the main objective is to avoid that an entity can detect from the information that the user is providing who is that user. So try to learn about these activities in that sense. Avoid obviously the trackability in some sense, and the traceability of the user. So don't normally what happens when you have one single point like identity provider. So to reduce this kind of dependency. And finally, we already have tried to solve most of the stuff with the inclusion of on the support of a collection of crypto solution, in this case based on attribute-based credentials and other technologies, so that we can allow the user to be able to control the specific attributes he wants to reveal based on credentials proof that are being provided by a trusted, in this case, entity. I would say in some sense. So in some sense, we want to maintain as much as the security and the facility that we are having on the actual identity management system, but supporting, as I already said, all these mechanisms that are helping the user to take in control of what to present, and also to reduce the way that the identity providers are able to track, or the service provider are able to identify what you are doing and what you are using. So for doing that, Olympus, as I already mentioned, I'm not going to go to the details. The details later, if you like, we can comment. It's basically has this idea of having a distributed and oblivious identity provider solution. That it is distributed in the way that several identity providers, in that sense, what we call virtual identity providers, can manage different collection of attributes of the user. So in that way, there's no one point where all the information from the user is being managed or stored or supported in that sense. But at the same time, and this is the oblivious part, is we are able to generate different kind of identities in some sense that are being provided to the service providers, as you can see here, so that there's no way to correlate them so that the service provider could identify that the same user is accessing to the different service being provided by them in that sense. So for doing that, we have created a distributed management of the identity providers in that sense over what we call, as I already mentioned, several identity providers, so that there's no single authority that can impersonate or track the user. We use new cryptographic solution to mitigate all the drawbacks that I already mentioned, to increase the privacy preserving aspect, to increase the anonymity on the interaction. We provide also solutions that are trying to minimize the requirement from the hardware perspective in general, either for the client, but also for the service providers, and in general, trying to be more user-friendly. Because as you know, one of the main limitations for several of these technology of private preserving has been how difficult they are in order to be used on the scenario for the end user, that are the one that really need to make take advantage, of this kind of technologies. This is as already mentioned, not for you to understand that we have created a complete architecture, identifying the different elements, the different components, modules that are needed in order to support this from the perspective of the user, for the client, from the virtual identity provider, from the relaying part, etc. And for doing that, we have identified two technologies. One is being used for the online connection of identity providers. Another one, as you will see later, that is more connected to the offline situation. So for those, one of them is the Pesto solution. In other cases, distributed pre-ABC, as I already mentioned. But the important thing is that both approaches are integrated on the same architecture. So it can be selected depending on the scenario, depending on the services, as you will see later on our use cases. In that sense, the main advantage to having these two approaches, the online versus the online, is that you have advantage in one case or in the other. So depending on your condition, your situation, your context, your configuration, maybe you will be more interested on approaching solution based online or offline, as you will see later on the use case, no? In that sense. So basically, that gives you, like, we have a flexibility, we have support to different scenarios, and I think that is one of the most important things, also or relevant things of the solution that we provide in Olympus. So just to start concluding this in general presentation, I already said this is not to give you the technical details, just to give you the broad understanding of what we are providing. Olympus has several advantages that we have tried to enumerate from the different perspectives. No? For the identity providers, because basically we are able to provide solutions that give added value to the users, basically from their security and their privacy. In the papers that we already have generated in the document, you can see that the solution is as secure or more secure indeed than several of the existing approaches. So we can demonstrate that we are not only maintaining the privacy, but also we are maintaining the security conditions in the solution that we are bringing here. We allow new paradigms and flow, for example, as you will see in the case of the credit file and the financial entities, specifically in the case of the offline situation, where basically you don't need to be continuously interacting with identity providers. We also provide an easy adaptation of the solution in that sense, so that we will see we are not creating something that can be substitute what already exists, but can be customized and integrated with the existing mechanisms that you can have on your own, I would say, solution or business. From the users, why it's important, because basically we provide the user the capability of providing minimum disclosure principles so that they can have control about their identity, the attributes that they want to share in that sense. Also the usability, because at the end, one of the points I already mentioned was the limitation that we can have on the usability in most of the case. And as already said, we also have possibilities, as you will see later, to have different operations with different mechanisms based on single sign-on, on wallets, and similar stuff. No? So, and also the offline scenario that I already mentioned. So there are several advantages, as I would say, that not changing also the way he normally now have in order to interact with the service provider. For the service provider, because we already mentioned, we have the two complementary approaches, so they can choose the best fit depending on their authentication flows. We don't rely on the permanent availability of the identity providers. In the case of for example, of the offline case, we also allow and support better the legal requirement about the management of the user data, because we are able to restrict the kind of attributes that the service provider need to manage in that sense. And also we have provided, as already said, different, and you will see later, different use case for the verifiers on the identity proofing, and provide added value in terms of security and privacy from the product that they can offer in that sense. And finally, from the, I would say, government point of view, if you like, or from the policy maker, if you want, we have this is an enabler, as you will see later also when Christina presents, is enabler for regulation, for existing regulation, but also for future regulation in that sense, because we are supporting the GDPR aspect. We are perfectly integrated with the eIDAS, and also we will be in line with what is eIDAS 2 in that sense. And finally, as already mentioned, some of the solutions that we are bringing are based on the standardization. For example, the work already that is being done on MDL is part of the ISO working group, and already is going to be discussed yesterday, or this day indeed, sorry, it's being discussed as one possible solution. And also the use of W3C verified credentials, for example, that is also something that is quite now relevant on this sector. No? So the two use cases I already mentioned that now we will be explaining in detail will be the mobile driver license, or MDL, where we show how to minimal disclosure to identify the process using this MDL in that sense, with the idea that can be used as a way to identify and authorize the users to access different services, specifically if they are offline. And the credit file platform, as already mentioned, that allows to preserve anonymity and data minimization when you are in trying to establish contractual relationship with a financial entity in that sense. And then we have also, we are not going to present it, but it's available on the website with that information. We have what we call another use case that is more to demonstrate very concrete functionalities. For example, the integration with the OpenID, how we are using W23 verified credential, the use of multi-factor authentication. So we have created that use case a little bit to demonstrate some of the advantage that I already mentioned previously, specifically in the interoperability aspect that I think it's quite important. Okay, just to conclude, as I already mentioned, we have a web page that you can later go in. Specifically for those that are interested, we have also open source code available with examples, so that you can, the one that interest can go there and either take some examples that we already are providing, so that can serve as a baseline, no, for future development. So, and we are quite open to future discussion, as I already mentioned, to how to improve not only the code, but also how to improve the functionality that we are providing in the actual solution. Okay, so this is mostly what I wanted to say from my side. As we already mentioned, we will have the question for the end of the session, and now I give the turn to Nuno, that is going to present the first use case.
Okay, thank you very much, Antonio. So can you see my screen now? Yes.
Yes.
So we in this project we decided to this is a very beginning of the project, to apply the technology and the concept to a use case. And by that time, I mean, there was an ongoing working group working on the standardization for the mobile driving license. As you might be aware, the driving license is used in many countries around the world as an ID document, and the identity document for people to access services or access restricted goods. And so it's very important in a, let's say, a daily use for many people around the world. So we took the challenge to adopt or integrate the Olympus technology into the MDL. The MDL, it's standardized in ISO 18013 Part 5. There was ongoing work for several years of a group of experts. And finally, it came released and approved last September. So now it's officially an international standard and approved and published, available for everyone. This standard has two workflows, so it can work offline or online. So it fits also with the possibilities and the concepts from Olympus. And as a standard has, of course, a goal of interoperability between implementations of MDLs all around the world, but also have an important privacy goal that was to minimize the data necessary in all of these use cases or daily use cases for people around the world. One of them, most important and most common, is the age proof. When people are, for example, buying alcohol, they need to prove their age. And so this is a very relevant specific use case. With a traditional card, you hand out the card or show your card and show all the information that is printed on the card. But strictly for, let's say, buying alcohol, you just need to prove that you are over 18. So that showing the card is a lot more information than what's strictly necessary. Not even the birth date is required to demonstrate that someone is over 18. So so just to emphasize the importance of this standard, the ISO 18013 Part 5, it is also expected to become the basis for other electronic ID documents. And there is a very concrete case of the COVID vaccination certificate. There is a published work of how it could be used for the COVID vaccination passport. The standard that is being adopted and used today is a quick implementation that was drafted, but looking forward to the future, this could be also mapped quite nice and quite easily to the ISO standard. And this was actually proven in a recent interoperability test event of the MDL that occurred in October, sorry, in Rotterdam a few weeks ago. This standard has also been listed as one of the key technologies that can be adopted on the upcoming eIDAS digital wallet. This was an initiative highly publicized on when announcing the eIDAS 2.0. So it's targets it as one of the key technologies and will most likely make it into the final specification of the eIDAS digital wallets. Of course, I mean, we identified some limitations on the ISO standard. At some point in time, I mean, the standard had to be released and assumptions and compromise had to be done. So one of them is about age proof. As I said, is one of the main use cases, daily use cases. And so the way it is defined now does not allow for dynamic verification of age. So the way it is implemented now is that there are few assertions that are statically defined and created or issued by the corresponding issuing authority. Let's say age over 18, over 25, over 65, that's true or false. But it doesn't allow intermediate values if they are not predefined by the issuing authority, or richer cases like 17.5 years, for example, or even ranges. So to check if someone is between the age of 18 and 65, for example. So it's not possible also. Also, it's, as I said, it's based on static assertions. So meaning that if I enroll for MDL and I have my MDL stored in my phone and I'm actually doing 18 today. So today I'm not over 18, but tomorrow I'll be. But since the data is static, tomorrow I won't be able to prove that I'm over 18. So this limits both the scenarios for verifiers as well as the usability for users. So we took this challenge. We looked into the concepts of Olympus, and we found out that it could nicely fit the need. And yeah, so we integrated the technology into the workflow of ISO 18013, so that the user can only share or is only required to share the strictly needed information. So for example, proof of age, it doesn't need to share the birth date, for example. It's not strictly needed, and it can accommodate several use cases, or let's say values age values that the verifier wants to check. And we also implemented both offline and online verification modes. So for the offline, the verification occurs locally, just between the holder app and the verifier app. So this works with a first session establishment by scanning the QR code and then transferring information through a local Bluetooth low energy connection. The verifier just has to have the issuing authority CA certificates as its trust anchor, and then it can verify the dynamically generated proof on the older app that is received through the established Bluetooth connection. Also for the online, it works also on the online. In this case, the older MDL app passes the credential that is issued by the Olympus IDP back to the verifier. We'll later have a demo at the end of this presentation. right now, so I wanted just to highlight what models have been developed for the pilot. So we developed 2 apps, one for the holder and one other one for the verifier. We deployed the IDP server composed of several instances of IDPs. And we also developed the
تمام
system.
قانون كاتبنا كل شيء
Sorry?
كل شيء معنا. لا لا صح.
Sorry, we're using some we're hearing some noise. Maybe you could mute. Yeah, thanks. So we also developed a mock department of motor vehicle just to generate some sample MDL data. As I said, we'll have a demo afterwards. There you'll see the enrollment phase, so how the MDL data goes into the smartphone. And then there is a verification phase where it starts with the setup by the verifier. So the verifier selects what attributes he wants to check. Yeah, and then the transaction occurs. So there is a first session establishment through the scanning of QR code that is generated on the older app device. Yeah, and then there is a Bluetooth low energy connection that is established after this first session engagement. And yeah, and then the information is, the assertion is generated and exchanged from the older app to the verifier app. We'll see this later in the demo. So before jumping into this demo, so I just wanted to highlight what are the key benefits. So on one side, it answers the initial challenge of complying or providing a solution for a broader set of use cases for verifiers when they are doing some sort of identity proofing on their business use case. Also, there is increased privacy protection because there is absolute data minimization, so only the strictest information required for the business case is provided. Yeah, so also it also prevents tracking because with the concept of distributed IDPs, there is no single point where all the information is stored and can be checked, and also minimize also the impact of data breaches. So if one instance is compromised, it doesn't have all the information. So yeah. Also in terms of GDPR is also an important tool for complying with regulation. It also has an important advantage for the provider because it provides a differentiation over existing solutions. So one could differentiate or have a competitive advantage over the existing providers that use just classic solutions. And last but not least, is also based on the standard, well-defined standard approved. So it takes on the building blocks that provides interoperability and were well discussed and understood. And it's also extensible to other ID documents, as I said before, most likely the COVID passport and also the eIDAS digital wallets. Before going to the demo, just to finalize what is the results and let's say the offering to the market that our companies are bringing. So one side to be the MDL apps, so with the flavors for the holder and the verifier. Also the Olympus virtual IDP instances that can be deployed on premises. Also the MDL validation service that allows validation to occur also online instead of on the verifier app if required. Also PKI supporting the ISO 18013 Part 5 certificate profiles that are very specific. And of course also professional services that can be linked together to these products. And with this, I conclude. I pass now the presentation to my colleague Zeta Sorla from Skittles, which will show now the demo. Thank you very much, Zeta.
Thank you, Nuno. Thank you for the introduction. All right. I hope that now you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, we can see now.
All right, great. So in this video, we will see the two aforementioned applications of the MDL holder and MDL verifier in action. We presume, wait, okay. We presume that the MDL holder already possesses an MDL in his own device, so he uses it to register to the Olympus identity provider server with this MDL. And so in order to create an account. And upon the successful registration, the holder application will also request for credentials in order to store in the device and be later on ready for verifications even in offline mode. The MDL verifier application also needs to perform a setup step the first time it's initiated in order to download some information from the IDP server and initialize the two verification modes needed for the two ways of verification. Now, we will see for firstly an example of online verification, since the two applications are ready. The outcome of which will be successful since the verifier checks whether the MDL holder is older than 18 years old. So the MDL holder chooses to be verified in online mode and presents the QR code in order to initiate a BLE connection with the verifier. Now through BLE, verifier will send the policy to the MDL holder, which then will be forwarded to the IDP server. The IDP server is responsible in the online authentication mode to generate the token, which will send back to the MDL holder to be forwarded to the verifier. And the verifier then will check whether the MDL holder complies with the needed checks of the policy and show the verification result in the verifier's screen. The same check can be done in offline mode using the credentials that were already downloaded. So if the MDL holder doesn't have an internet connection, he can choose to be authenticated with offline mode. The process is the same for what the users can see, but the process in the application changes because now the token will be generated inside the MDL holder's app based on the credentials that were already stored. In both versions of authentication, though, online and offline, the MDL connection that is used to transfer both the policy and the token between the two devices is based on the ISO standard for the MDLs regarding BLE transactions. And if we have a bit of a little time longer, I can show you also one unsuccessful case where the check from the verifier is if the holder is older than 65 years old now, which is not true for this sample data. And in this case, it's the IDP that will not provide the token to the MDL holder since the holder does not comply with the policy checks. So the result of the verification will be an unsuccessful and will be presented in the verifier's screen with a proper message. So that's for our MDL use case. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Zeta. Thanks, Nuno. Okay, let's go to the next presentation. In this case, Noelia. In the meantime, I see that already there's a question in the chat. Obviously, we will answer, but one of my colleagues now is preparing the answer to you, Guy. So basically, just for you to know this, we are working in parallel.
So can you see my screen now?
Yes, Noelia.
Okay, so my name is Noelia Martinez. I work in loyalty, and as we were in charge of the credit file use case, my purpose with this session is to explain a bit the precedents that motivated the use case, present the results of our evaluations, and after that demonstrate it with a demo. Okay. So sorry. No. I want to begin with the motivations of this use case. During the preparations of the proposal, different regulations were approved, and that provided a prepared environment for this use case to take place. First of all, was the law of April 2015 that defined the concept of a document that contains extensive information on the financial situation. In addition, there were some new initiatives to ease access to credit and to avoid from being excluded from the financing circuit issued by the International Committee of Credit Reporting. And finally, we had also the GDPR regulation that established that it's mandatory to express consent to use the user personal data and to store the related documentation during several years. I would like to continue with the objectives that were set. Our main goal here was to impulse a change in the way that the relationships among users and entities are performed. Currently, at least here in Spain, the process to get a loan or a mortgage is slow, boring, and sometimes a customer has to go to different entities to be able to contract the service of their interest. And also, all the entities have to store the user data even when they are not suitable for them. Here, our interest is to make possible this change by improving the usability of the system, and doing that by capturing only a minimal amount of personal data to ease also the legal security aspects. Using only the information that is required has the benefit of storing less personal information, and that has the consequence of minimizing the risk of not complying with the current regulations. And the letter objectives mean nothing without assuring the privacy of the process. This means that another main goal was to manage the user information in an anonymous way. This implies for the entity to only access, as I said before, to the data it needs to perform an evaluation of the situation of the user, and it required to do that without using any personal data of the user that could identify them. All of that means also that we can put any barriers regarding the type of devices or platforms that the users could use. So we wanted our solution to be independent of the platform. And finally, another important objective for this use case is for the system to be seamless among data sources. This means that the required data could be collected from several data sources, and that it would be possible to change them at any point. As you can imagine, the user case goals were aimed to get the more benefits for the users and the entities, the better. And here I'm going to talk about only a few of them. So regarding the user's benefits, one of the most important ones for the convenience of the process is that it would not be necessary to go to the banks physical office because all the process happens online. Also, as I said before, only the minimal personal data is provided to the entities. That means that they don't access the full documents, but they can evaluate the user suitability in relation to a service anyway. And talking now about the financial entities, they don't need to save the user's personal data if the contractual relationships is not happening. Also, although it's something that depends on the entities, the response can happen quicker than with the traditional process. Now it's time to give a little overview of the use case. Summarizing a bit what I said before, its aim is to demonstrate that it's possible to disclose the minimal required financial information when requesting financing for companies, self-employed, unlegal, or natural individuals. So the use case we defined is based on a citizen that wants to contract some product or service from an entity. And as I said before too, its benefits are the only information that is shared with the entity is the one that is required for that particular request. For implementing this use case, several requirements were defined. The main thing we need is the user interest in a specific service from an entity. This user must have a qualified certificate issued by a trusted organization, loyalty in this case, that identifies this person. Also, we need the user to sign the consents that are required when retrieving their financial information. And finally, we need the actual financial data that is retrieved in the shape of a financial report. This report is signed by the organization that generates it to assure its integrity, and it must be signed to by the user to guarantee its ownership. Also, our marketing department took the time and the effort to come up with a commercial denomination, private in this case. Once the use case implementation was completed, we conducted an evaluation with potential users. For this to happen, we created a specific demonstration environment that the only purpose was for this evaluation, and it was shut down after that. All users were provided with a user manual of the system and a complete testing script for them to follow. Also, in order to prevent any kind of problems that could happen, a direct support channel was created to help them complete the evaluation. At the end of the process, they were asked to answer a questionnaire about their experience. The responses, along with the metrics that we implemented in different parts of the pilot, were measured and analyzed. A summary of them is presented in the following slide. As you can see here, we have 23 users evaluating the use case during a month, more or less. These users performed at least one enrollment each and an average of 2 authentications using both of the technologies developed during the implementation phase of the project. Regarding the user trust in the solution, 81% of the users said that they trust the use of their personal data, as long as the entity that manages them is trusted. In relation to the solution usability, they suggested a few improvements regarding different aspects, but 83% considered the application easy to use. And finally, about the user satisfaction, 87% of the users thought it was useful and they would use it in their daily life. As I said before, our use case is compatible with both Android and iOS platforms. It is possible to find the main difference on iOS platforms, where the pilot performs direct calls that makes the process faster, but it does not provide credential storage, and it's only available in centralized deployment of the servers. Instead, On the Android devices, the functionality is complete with a penalization in the time the process takes to finish. Also, both types of deployments are available. And decentralized deployment with Android platform is a demonstration that I'm going to present in a few minutes. Finally, all the work that has been presented here resulted in several assets that are interrelated among them. A website is, in this case, the point of entrance to the use case, where the user chooses an entity and a specific service in which they are interested. Then an app that contains the main functionality is used to perform the rest of the operations required in the process. We have also a platform that communicates with a database and that manages the operations over the user consents and the financial reports. The app communicates too with a specific implementation and deployment of the Olympus framework that it's in charge of the anonymization of the financial information required by the entity. And in addition to that, there are two external platforms, as you can see here, that are linked to the app. One is the qualified certificate platform that provides the user's qualified certificate and its data by means of another app, CERT in this case. The other external app platform is the credit file that retrieves the user consents and the financial report ready to be signed by the user. And in this slide, you can see a schematic diagram of the first part of the use case workflow that shows the relationships among the assets and serves as an introduction of the demonstration of the system that comes next. And I have the video prepared here, so give me a second here. Okay. So, sorry. In the next video, you are going to see the use case functionality as it works. I will try to explain the process from a business point of view. This demo starts with the user selecting a profile that is the combination of an entity and a service or product. Once some service is selected, the website displays the list of the information required from the user for that particular service. If the user confirms, a QR code based on information that represents the user selection is generated. After that, the user selects the app to scan the QR code, and if the system validates it, the data of the request is displayed for the user to continue with the process. At this stage, the user has to authenticate in the CERT app. It is required for them to have been enrolled in the system before and to register in the Create File platform. And once the user press authenticate button, the user needs to select one of their certificates if more than one is available. After that, the user should confirm that they want to go on with the process. Tapping in the continue button after verifying the information displayed regarding the request. And then it's at this moment when the system retrieves the required consents for being able to collect the data and generate the financial report. After accessing the first time, the consents are stored in the user's device. The next step is the retrieval of the financial report, which is also stored in the user's device until it expires. The user can review its content at any time. If it's the first time this user accesses, they must sign it using their qualified certificate. This process requires to introduce first an OTP code that the signature provider requires and the PIN code of the certificate that was configured during the user enrollment in CERT. After that, the following step is finally to perform the authentication in the Olympus framework. And here, as 1 second, that it's now. As we are using an Android device, this process can last a variable amount of time depending on the user's device characteristics that limit the velocity and the amount of data that the system has to prepare. Once the process is finished, the navigation is redirected and a push notification is received in the device, informing that the evaluation request was sent to the entity. After some time, the user receives a second notification that means the evaluation was performed and the results are ready to be checked. The user can access the request after receiving this notification, selecting it from the request lists. And then they need to perform another certificate authentication, proving that it's the same user that requested the evaluation the first time. And then once the user is authenticated in CERTI, the result of the entity's evaluation is displayed. In this case, the request was rejected, so the process ends here. If the request was accepted, the user can decide whether disclosing their identity or not, to go on with the process and to start a contractual relationship with the entity. And that covers the whole flow of this use case, and it's a wrap from my side.
Many thanks, Noelia. I mean, I think it's also it's a way. One of the objectives also to show you this one is that it's another example of the kind of services. Although here it's been applied, no, to a concrete scenario of the financial, it could be more generic in some sense. So let's have the next session, the next talk. In this case, my colleague Christina. So Christina, please.
Yeah. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, just a second. I think now better, right?
Yep, better.
Okay, that's good. Okay, I'm Cristina. I come from the University of Murcia, and I'm going to talk about the importance of the results of the Olympus project with regard to the coming modifications in the eIDAS regulation. That is the core rule for electronic identification and authentication services in the European Union. As you might be already aware, the proposal for review of the eIDAS regulation was published in June 2021, advancing structural modifications for electronic identification and authentication services for the purpose of realization of the European digital single market. Among the content, I would say that there are a set of remarkable objectives. It aims to unify the public and private service regulatory regime in their access, because one of the main limitations of eIDAS 1 was that its mandatory scope was strictly limited to the access to cross-border public services. It also aims to increase citizens' confidence in the European Digital Identity Framework to provide citizens with an easy and fully interoperable eID mean, so they do not need to trust basically American large platforms in the access to various services online. It also aims to empower natural and legal persons in the control of their data, enhance compliance with data minimization, with data protection principles, but in particular with data minimization principle by imposing clear obligations and also regulating the figure of selective disclosure of attributes that has been given the name of electronic attestation of attributes. At the same time, I would say that it also opens the way to new models of governance with the regulation of the DLTs based on non-centralized authorities. The proposal for review had basically 3 policy options, among which the policy option preferred has been the third one, the issuance of these European digital identity wallets by member states, or at least recognized somehow by member states. Among the features that these European digital identity wallets will have to comply with, I would like to highlight that they must be oblivious by nature. This is the concept that Antonio has introduced. This means basically that the identity provider shouldn't be able to track users' online activity So it would put on to one of the main problems of our society nowadays, that is also known as surveillance society. Nevertheless, this privacy must be guaranteed not only before the identity provider, but also before the service providers. This is what I mean with this impossibility to link or track users' activity online by the service providers either. At the same time, it must be in full control of the user. It will also have to comply with a level of assurance high. That is to say, it will involve from the ID proofing to get the wallet to the authentication methods and even the data management taking place therein. Also, it must be able to store this identification data in forms of credentials, something that is quite in line, as you might already know, with the operational model of the sovereign identity. And it will have to be certified by external authorities that it complies with this European Union digital wallet trust mark. Nevertheless, although it's true that these wallets are already an important change, I would say that definitely the most important innovation in eIDAS 2 is the mandatory scope of acceptance of these wallets. I said in the first slide that one of the main limitations in eIDAS 1 was that it was strictly limited its mandatory scope to the acceptance before cross-border public services. This is something that it's maintained in eIDAS 2, but beyond public services, what we can see is that in fact, the wallets will have to be accepted by private relying parties where strong authentication is required. That is to say, sectors such as banking, telecommunication, energy, among others, and also very large online platforms in the sense defined by the Digital Service Act. So basically Facebook, Google, Amazon, and all these platforms that have been raising important ethical issues during the last decade will be now mandated to accept these European digital identity wallets. With regard to small and medium providers, in this case, the acceptance will be voluntarily, although the European Union will try to encourage through some codes of conduct. So we are talking about soft law. Now, a context of the common modifications with eIDAS 2, I would like to highlight which are the main points in common with the work developed in the project Olympus. Here in this slide, you can see 3 points that I'm going to develop. This oblivious authentication, that is to say that the identity provider cannot survive usage activity online. Level of assurance high, that in the end I am referring to technical standards that assure that it complies with a certain level of security, and selective disclosure. So basically that you disclose the strictly necessary data to get the service, the product, or whatever. So with regard to the first point, the oblivious authentication, I said that one of the features of these wallets is that it must be oblivious by nature. This means that the IDP, the identity providers, credential providers, providers of the wallet, shouldn't be able to track users' activity. In this sense, one of the main objectives in the project Olympus has been to develop this oblivious identity provider. And in fact, this is something that has been successfully achieved through the use of PAVC-based credentials that the user is able to store in his or her wallet and to use to further authentication processes. In this sense, we are breaking the connection between the identity provider and the service provider. This is something that, as you can see in this slide, has been integrated in both use cases. In the case that has been described by Noelia, the financial entity would just receive this document that basically proves that the person is financeable, viable to get the loan. So the user will be able to store this credential in his or her wallet. And in the case of the MDL use case, to store this credential containing the identification data of a driver license that can be used for further e-commerce purposes. The second point in common is the level of assurance high. In the end, as you can imagine, with wallets, we are not going to solve the problem of authentication methods. I would even dare to say that this is something that is going to become of acute emergency, because in the end, a big part of the security of these wallets will strongly rely on the authentication method and how it prevents from unauthorized users. In the end, in Olympus, as Antonio introduced, they have developed a highly resilient password system that offers higher security than traditional passwords, so it prevents from a wider range of cyber attacks. So in the end, we can even be talking about a level of assurance high pursuing the eIDAS regulation. At the time, it is an easy, user-friendly authentication method because we are still talking about password. And what is more important, it prevents from the use or the processing of biometric data. Sorry, no. The third point in common is the selective disclosure. As I said in my first slide, one of the main objectives in eIDAS 2 is to enhance compliance with data protection principles, and in particular with the principle of data minimization. We have clear obligations, such as the one directed to very large platforms to request the strictly necessary data. And also the eIDAS 2 is gonna give legal certainty to the figure of electronic attestation of attributes. As you have seen in the two use cases, they are quite focused on the deployment of privacy preserving techniques. And they go even a step further because they envisage the possibility to be deployed with zero knowledge proof, something that also in legal terms, we still need to discuss about it. It's taking privacy definitely a step further, and it's going to become quite important in the coming months. Nevertheless, well, I have finished these 3 points, but I would say that the possibilities of Olympus, in fact, do not end here, but they are going a step further with integration with blockchain. As you can see in this figure, we have successfully, my colleagues have successfully integrated Olympus with blockchain. And in fact, by integrating Olympus with this DLT, what we get is an extra layer of trust. In particular, I would like to highlight that by introducing this ledger, the possibility that we get is to carry the ledger, the service providers that are part of a framework, and which data are exactly requesting. This is something very important because in the end, this is one of the main objectives in eIDAS 2, and it's not only about imposing the legal obligation, it's about introducing mechanisms to assure this will be enforced. So this is one of the innovations, also will prevent from unauthorized parties to join the ledger, to control, and even can be used as a guarantee of decentralization, as no partial IDP holds these controller roles, so it is fully decentralized. From the point of view of the user, I think here is more clear. What we get is that in the end, the user would be able to know which services providers do they have in the framework, and they will be able to establish, to set their preference with regard to the disclosing of their attributes. Here, nothing, just a predicate, or if the person wants to reveal his or her personal data. And what is even more, the user would get a warning in the case the service provider tries to modify unilaterally the privacy policy to get more or different personal data. So this can be quite useful. And just to conclude, why is all of this that important? Because in the end, we think that eIDAS 2 definitely is establishing the basis for the realization of a more secure, privacy respectful, and fully interoperable digital single market. The problem is that what we have still, in fact, is a proposal, and we are still basically missing an important technical development. As you might be aware, there is a common toolbox proposal. So here is where Olympus is playing a key role, because in the end, as you have seen, the developments are quite in line with the content of these proposals. So in the end, I would say that we have to take them into account, these innovations adapted, integrated with others, if we want to realize this scenario that is proposed in eIDAS 2. So this was all from my side. I hope it was more or less clear, and thank you for your attention.
Many thanks again, Cristina. So I think that with this, basically, we have concluded our round of presentation, basically, as we already mentioned. The main objective, as I already said about all this, has been to give you some highlights about what we understand are the key, I would say, the innovation or key advantage, no, that we have with our solution. And now we would like very openly to also receive feedback in the different aspects. So I mean, I already have seen that there was some kind of technical interaction through the chat. Thanks to the people already and my colleagues answering about that. But I think that also what we would like to hear is about how do you feel this kind of solution could fit on your area of work, on your business, or what are you see that how we can help you, I would say, in the future in case it is that possible. And basically that will be our main objective with this whole discussion. Also to create, as we mentioned, a kind of group of interest where we can propagate some of the information and the results we are bringing from our project, not only when we finish, but also in the later and for the sustainability of the results. Because as I already mentioned, most of our results will be open source. We have created a GitHub repository where we will continue working on it. So basically, anything that you can think that we can collaborate in the future would be quite welcome, because we will. This is part of our objective also. No? And just to conclude and to leave you open to your comments, just to mention that we have created and once we finish this session, all the slides will be available again on the link where you already have registered. And the idea is that also we will provide a questionnaire that will be very, I would say, grateful if you are able to fill it. It will be a very simple questionnaire where we try to a little bit collect some kind of part of the feedback that we mentioned now, but also maybe that will give you some more time, at least 1 week until next Wednesday, so that you would be able to go there, provide some answer, and provide us feedback, no? That can help us also in order to identify this kind of possible, I would say, extensions and another area where we can apply the solution that we are providing. And that's all from my side. So now I keep you open to the discussion. Jeff, please be the master of ceremony, if you like, of this.
Well, thank you, Antonio, and also a big thank you to the presenters. I have a couple of times asked for folks to put their questions into the chat. We have a question now. Do you see, this is from Alberto, do you see also complementaries of Olympus with efforts around verifiable identities and decentralized management of DID anchors and EBSI, SSIF, which may also play a relevant in relation to eIDAS 2? So I don't know, Antonio, if you want to tackle that question, or Christina.
Yeah, maybe Christina can answer directly, no? So because she was working exactly was mentioned that in the last her last slide.
Yes.
Christina, you want to answer?
Yes. I don't have very well the connection. Just can I go out and come in again?
Yeah. Okay, perfect. No problem. I mean, in the meantime, I can answer. I mean, Alberto, I mean, thanks for your question, and certainly that's why I was trying to say. I mean, when Christina already mentioned the last slide, we put it there a little bit to connect exactly with what you were mentioning. No, our idea is that, and this is part of the use case that I already mentioned, is the third use case we already have created, is to link first our solution with the verified identities in that sense. And then the point is how this can be integrated on the DLT in order to be referenced by the deeds, for example, so that we can have this solution totally in align with what will be the new service being created by the Commission about this EBCI in that sense. So absolutely relevant. One of the work, and this is good because here my colleague also from the legal side, not only Christina but also the other people that are already on the group. Are specifically working on the integration of this kind of proposal or idea inside the new regulation, because they are part also of the working group for the Commission, and I think that's why I think this is also important that we bring the solution to the eIDAS, because I think it's going to be a next step, no, in that sense for most of the future service at the European level.
Okay, I think we might still be waiting for Christina to come back in.
Yeah, I'm here, but it disappeared, and I haven't understood it well because it cuts all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I already answered, Christian. No, we are just answering the question from Alberto regarding the evolution of the technical specification of security and interoperability of eIDAS toolbox that you mentioned just at the end of your presentation.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that, yes, I mean, that's why I think Christina was mentioned also that it's important that I think in her slide, no, he just put that toolbox, eIDAS toolbox, as one of the that need to be evolved, I would say, no, in order to cope with these new capabilities like a solution like Olympus is providing.
Yeah, basically is because in the end, that's what I was saying. We have the proposal, we have the objectives, but what we don't have yet is this technical development clear. It's definitely a movement towards this, let's say, self-sovereign identity operational model, although it's not fully self-sovereign, as you are aware, but definitely we have points in common with this verifiable credentials, decentralized identifiers, distributed ledgers. So yeah, definitely it's moving in this direction, but the toolbox in the end is to see which are the technical possibilities and to take a decision about it and to realize the objectives in the best possible way, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Maybe Antonio, worth mentioning with respect to the Olympus website. Can people get the code base from the work of the project? Can you say a word or two about that?
Yeah, as already was mentioning, actually what we have is, as I already mentioned, we have a repository where we have documentation about the libraries, basically, that we have generated, basically the solution and the component that we already have generated as part of the project. And also, I think what is more important, because I mean, having the components there and the libraries is something, I mean, good. But also, we already have provided a couple of examples to how to use it in order to integrate on certain services. Indeed, just to mention for some of you, if you are aware, there is another project that is called Reach Out at the European level that is basically helping us, a project like us, in order to be tested by developers in that sense. So we already have created a project inside Reach Out where we also have give some hints about how to use our solution, how it can be integrated, and in that way we will continue working in that direction, because I think it's important. I mean, we want to have like two paths of sustainability. One in the developer side, if you like, to continue with the work with this open source solution, that it can go in that direction, but also, as we mentioned, more focus on identifying some use cases, no, in that sense, and that's why also part of the discussion today on this workshop, possible use cases where you understand a solution like this one could be relevant. So to try to find a way to collaborate on that direction, and maybe to identify new business opportunities in that sense. No, for example, how to integrate our solution inside maybe a product that you already have, and you would like in the future to add new features like the one that we are proposing here.
Right. So maybe a follow on to what you're saying, and this question could go to you. It could also go to the other folks that have presented, but success may largely hinge on user acceptance and the perception on, you know, what's the usability in what Olympus has. Did you or any of the other team have any sort of, you know, interesting discoveries over the last, you know, few years with regards to the usability and sort of that user experience of interacting with Olympus?
Sorry, you were asking to me or to the public in general? So I didn't get it.
Yeah. So no, I wanted to pose that question to you, and also to any of the other folks that want to jump in, that have presented and have been involved in the project, because ultimately Olympus has value, and obviously, as you're saying, can be integrated. In doing so, what impact was that have on the user experience? And did you along the way discover, we sort of had this in the chat earlier, you can throttle with the amount of security that you may be tying in, and in doing so, do you maybe lose people where they feel like, this has become too cumbersome? That's kind of where I was headed, was to say, did you have any discoveries along the way? I see Nuno coming on camera to maybe jump in with a reaction.
Yeah, maybe I can bring some information. So along the pilot, we of course tested it with some users. I will share my screen again just to and some key information. So we have a few invited users to test the solution. They were given just, let's say, some information, but I mean not full training, of course. Yeah, I think we have quite good results. So from these users, we have all of them enrolled successfully to the solution. They tried out, and it worked seamlessly, both in online and offline workflow. So that was, let's say, flawless. Yeah, and afterwards, I mean, everyone felt confident using the system. Also, the large majority were preferring actually the MDL towards the physical documents. So yeah, I think from the user perspective, I think there is a demand, a push for that. So there's, I think, is a wide acceptance. There's, I mean, we didn't found any particular problems in terms of usability. So yeah, at least on, let's say, the MDL side, I think the stage is set for rolling out now MDLs, and now also with the standard approved and released as an international standard.
Thank you, Nuno.
Yeah, I think that also, I mean, I think from what already was also presented by Noelia. No? I don't know, Noelia in her slides, she already also indicate the feedback being received by the user. No? So I think that in general, just to mention, obviously this kind of solution at the end that in some sense are helping the user in some to be more confident about how to manage their attributes, their data, are always going to be very well welcome, I would say, by the end user. No, the users are more and more aware that there's a lot of information flowing by the internet, and they want to have in control of that one. No? So I think that is a request, a need in some sense that is coming more and more from the user side. In that sense, so and I think one of the main problems of the privacy preserving technologies up to now have been that they have been quite difficult to be used. So that's why in the beginning one of the main objectives was to do something that makes so simple as the way that now they are doing when they are interacting with the I mean, typical identity providers that they use on their social networks in that sense. But demonstrating that we can maintain or increase the security and the privacy, and at the same time we also can offer additionally, for example, one of the discussion in the chat was about this the use of MFA as alternatives to increase the security and so on. So what I'm saying is that the minimum can be covered, and also we can increase the security that also already are being provided. That's maintaining or increasing at the same time the privacy of the user. Mm-hmm. In concrete, there is, I mean, one of the aspects I think is not only about the user. I mean, I'm sorry because I wanted to connect to the question come from Hans, no, saying about what is the impact on the service provider. in that sense. And so basically our objective also, as we already have mentioned, is to be totally interoperable with existing solution as much as we can. So basically from the perspective of the service provider, we are not changing, I mean, except that in the case we are using some kind of privacy preserving technology, they need to be taken into account. But in principle, the idea of this distributed IDP is not affected, it's not being seen by the service provider. They are just seeing one identity provider, although we internally has distributed in a way that the service provider don't share all the information from the user. We have different identity providers, a virtual identity provider that can manage different blocks of attributes of the user in some sense without affecting the service provider. So in that sense, we minimize the impact of the service provider through the solution that we are bringing on our approach. So our main objective at the end, sorry, and with that I conclude, was to try always to simplify or to reduce the impact, I would say, no, from the perspective of the user, but also from the service provider, so that this is a solution that can be easily being supported on the market at the end. No, we have without changing everything how it's working now.
Right. Okay. Well, we do have another question that came in the chat, and I think that it primarily is rooted in this notion of potential abuse, where an individual may actually have within their identification credential and whatever the attributes are, information that they don't necessarily, it's not in their interest for someone to have access to that. And I guess the question here is, you know, if in the case of government, there was a demand for the information to be handed over, what are the safeguards and sort of what are maybe the protections that exist, and do you want to talk a little bit about through the project what was the work that sort of was done around, you know, how do you protect against, you know, potential abuse? And also, I think it's worth noting that all of this work clearly crosses multiple sectors. So, you know, private sector, government related usage. Antonio?
Yeah. No, I mean, I was just trying to read, but maybe any of my colleagues that are here also can try to answer, not only me in that sense. But anyway, I think that, I mean, my understanding from the question is that in that case is that in this case, the service provider, that will be the government, no, is requiring the user to provide certain attribute, no, about his sexual conditions, no. I was at in that case, no. My understanding is that, I mean, we cannot solve that. I would say in the sense that what we are providing is a tool that gives the freedom to the user to decide if he wants to provide that information or not about how the others, the service provider can request you that or not. In that case, it is your, obviously, if we're talking about the government, my understanding you're saying is something that you are a little bit more obliged to answer on it, no? I think that will be the point. Really, I mean, we haven't thought, just to be clear about that, no? Our vision was a little bit more about that the user, if he don't want to have a service because the service provider requests him more information than the one that really he wants to provide, he will not use the service at the end, no? At the end, they say, okay, I mean, if you ask me about something that I don't want to show you or to demonstrate, I'm not going to ask your service, and I will go to another service that already is able to offer me without providing that information. No, it's a little bit like what we discussed in the credit file scenario. No, first I provide you several information about myself. The one that I understand is minimum and necessary, so that you can identify if you want to provide me a credit. And if that is enough, perfect. If not, other one will provide it to me. So in that sense, no? So that I think would be the point. We really, I mean, personally, I haven't thought about that kind of scenario, but I think it's something quite interesting to also identify in that sense, or see how we can overcome with it. I think it's not only a problem of technology, I would say, no, it's more about a kind of policies where because in some sense, in our case, the idea is that when you want to access the service, you need to first identify which are the policies that that service is requesting. So basically, which is the attribute he was going to ask you. And based on this, you decide to go on or not. I was saying something. So you always can avoid to provide that information if you do want. No? Sorry, Nuno, maybe you wanted to say something.
Yeah, maybe I was just adding and thinking out of in the spot. Maybe I can add some words. I mean, of course, for a binary attribute, there's not much thing that you can do. So if something is yes or no, you need to provide or get an attribute. And I mean, ultimately, it's up to the user to consent to disclose it or not. But there are a wide range of attributes, and for example, sexual orientation is more and more understood as not a binary thing, but more of a kind of a fluid thing. Also, you could think of political orientation and things like that. So in that sense, I think one innovation that we are bringing is a way to provide information or an attribute over with a specific range without disclosing what exactly is my point in this range, let's say. So I could ask, are you in the extremes or are you in somewhere between, but not exactly pointing you in the right spot. So that, I think, is a nice innovation that can further protect the privacy of users.
Yeah.
We have another question that has come in, and it's, how are you going to use the ledger technology in your approach? I understand about trust and decentralized structure, which fits well with your approach. What about immutability of the blockchain? And again, don't know if Christina wants to come back on, or Antonio, if you want to jump in on this one first.
I mean, Christina?
Okay.
Yep. Well, I think it works. Yeah, definitely. In the end, what I said is that the main advantage of using blockchain would be this extra layer of trust. So it means that it's some kind of register where you can definitely carry the ledger, as I said, and know who is part and who is not part of the ledger if something changes. So as far as I understand, because I am from the legal side, in the end, it maintains this immutability feature. So it means that someone cannot change by itself something, it must be agreed. So you can see a trace of how things are even changing in the ledger. So for example, as I said, if a certain service provider have a privacy policy and says, I'm going to request this data. If the service provider wants to change it, it will have to be registered also in this ledger. So in the end, this is going to be traceable. And you can see if something has been changed, not, or even if the service provider is requesting the strictly minimum data. What I said that is quite important because it's something we are requiring in the legal test, but we need mechanisms, we need technology to be sure that it's going to be enforced. So this is what I meant. And in the end, this is immutability, because if it can be changed, it could be easily replaced by another privacy policy, and we might not know that it has been modified. So I don't know if this answers.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed, I mean, just to complement, as already was said by Christina, I think that also the point here is that, as already was mentioned in the last figure, I think from Christina, is that our objective also is to facilitate through the blockchain the possibility to identification of the different, for example, distributed IDP that you already mentioned. So one of the points here is that when we are talking about the virtual IDP, where the virtual IDP is composed of several IDPs or several virtual IDPs that can be distributed also about different areas. The point is how to register and how to discover them. At the end, no? In that sense, basically for the global provision, I would say. So this is also something that we are looking for with the use of the blockchain, that help not only about the trust level, but also about the service, the trust discovery, I would say, in that sense, of the different virtual IDP. I think that Julian also was just mentioned on the chat that anyway, not all the information has to be in the blockchain. Obviously, certainly, we are not. It's not that everything needs to be fitted there. It's how to use the advantage of the DLTs in general of the ledger as to support functionality that really makes sense from the perspective of this kind of solution. Sorry, Chris.
And in fact, something that I wanted to add is that what I have seen in this integration that is pretty nice also in terms of data protection is that we are not registering users' data. They're registering privacy policies. So you are sure that this has not been modified and it is what it's been requesting. Because of course, in GDPR, we are taking user information that could raise problems. But this is an excellent approach because it's, as Antonio said, using the advantages of blockchain for this purpose that is different to, to users' data.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to jump in on that question? And if not, please again.
Sorry, Hans just said yes, but I don't know if yes means yes to the another question or yes or.
He may have been saying yes to the fact that he said you can use a CA.
Yeah. Okay, I think you are answering to the question from Julian. I mean, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Jeff.
Okay, so here's why use a decentralized CA?
Maybe I don't get the point. When you mean the decentralized CA or decentralized IDP, you mean in general?
Yeah,
because
yeah. Can we get Hans? Can you unmute yourself?
Unmute, yes. Try to explain it because it's.
What I was wondering, I don't know if you hear me right now.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Now, because basically you certify the information which will be verified in the identity provider. The information which will be there will be certified by an authority. If that's correct, right?
Yep.
But that will always be a certain authority then. And
yes.
I think the one of the gains of using a DLT is that you can use the crowd to certify if something is correct or not. So it could also be used when looking at the data itself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, what is different is what we already have done. I would say in the actual version of the Olympus, where basically is following what you approach and what we can do, and this is what I understand from your side, what we can do if we are using a DLT, a ledger, for creating basically the trust between the ADPs. No, that's the point.
Yes, correct.
Exactly. No, but yes, absolutely. I mean, in that case, maybe you don't need a centralized CA for doing that.
Yes.
Antonio, if I may, before we use Olympus, there's a previous process of ID proofing where right now we're using a centralized CA, we could say, or multiple centralized CAs. But in that process, we could use what you're saying about the centralized, I don't know, mechanism for deciding which information is valid or not for the user. So it would be like a previous step, but it is not trivial, but it is mostly easy to see how it could be integrated with the current Olympus infrastructure.
Yes, because it's a bit in conflict with the concept of a self-sovereign identity.
Yeah. I mean, but I think that this is one of the things that we are now. I mean, I wanted to mention, but because here some of the colleagues are already involved. No, there's a follow-up project basically where we are going in that direction in this moment, basically. So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, you're right on the point. I understand. That's why I say, I mean, we didn't wanted to talk about the DLT from the beginning because actually it is something more on the future work than not on the actual development. I was saying something, but yeah. Certainly.
Yeah, maybe I can add some things also on that. I mean, of course, we're coming from a world of centralized identities. So in the case of MDL, that is, let's say, managed and regulated by an issuing authority. So there's basically not much to do about that. But generally speaking, Olympus framework allows for this concept of a virtual IDP server that is composed of multiple instances of IDPs. And these IDPs may not be the same entity or the same under the same organization. It can be a, let's say, a constellation or a consortium, or, well, there are several ways of or forms of governance that they could join together and operate a virtual IDP, a combined virtual IDP service, each of the companies or organizations operating its own instance and in collaboration with others.
So then basically it's a federation of identity providers, and the form you put it in is then the consortium or whatever.
It's a federation at the cryptographic algorithm, let's say.
Yeah.
Because let's say the authentication is reconstructed or can only be performed by the joint operation and cooperation of several instances.
Okay. Yep.
Antonio, you're muted.
Sorry. No, because I mean, I think one of the objectives also of this workshop, as already mentioned, is because I mean, all these technical issues are quite interesting, but I would like also to see if we can get any kind of feedback, because I don't know what is your sector. I would say, no, what are the sector of the different people that are here? So maybe if we can have any kind of feedback about what is your understanding of the kind of problems you already find that could be related to what Olympus is doing, that will be quite important for us. I would say for the technical part, I mean, we can discuss if necessary later, but I think that because now we have only 15 minutes, I would like to, if in that time we can get any kind of feedback from your side, no? About how do you see this technology to be integrated on your business, or I don't know what could be the sector you are touching. It's not only financial, for example, and if you see a kind of possibility of development there, I would say. Sorry, not to try to cut the discussion, but just to go to the focus of the objective that we will look at today also. So I don't know, Hans, because you were just mentioned here, can you? I don't know. What is your say? If you are
sorry, I didn't know it was meant for me. Yeah, I'm in the business of identity control. So you can say verification, a bit of identification. Basically, we have a centralized identity provider which can be set up as a federation. So it's basically the step before Olympus. The thing which is Olympus trying to solve. So that's also the reason I'm joining this meeting, to see what can be done. My question is more, if I look at the percentage of personal identifiable information, what can then be addressed with a yes or no, or a skill? Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
That I'm a bit doubting about, to be honest. Because yeah.
Sorry, please go ahead.
No, that's the only thing from the business practice, because I understand we have some risks, we have privacy issues. I understand that's very obvious with what we do right now. But I'm trying to find out where, because basically everybody is using identity, the verification for age or for being a man or a woman, or that I understand, but from the rest of the personal identifiable information, the business case for that, I'm trying to find myself as well.
Yeah.
So
one thing is the data that is collected, and that's factual, let's say. The other is what kind of information service providers need to obtain for specific business cases. So, for example, in many cases, nationality is asked, but probably it's not nationality that is required. Maybe it's just EU membership or Schengen space membership.
Yeah.
And so in many cases, service providers are asking information to be derived to answer other sort of questions. That's the same for age. I mean, you don't need to disclose your birth date. for the verifier to know if you are over 18, or if you can enter the Schengen space. You don't need to know if I'm Portuguese or Spanish or Polish. It just is the EU membership nationality. So yeah, there's quite a wide range of cases.
I agree. And regarding the data input, so before it gets certified, basically, that must come from another party, basically. So the data source.
Yes, I mean the attribute. Well, I mean the way the attribute or the data is submitted to the identity provider is, let's say, out of scope.
I understand. Okay, that's.
But what? Sorry, Christina, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, in fact, I wanted to say that it depends on how we implement Olympus, because I understand that we have been discussing about the use cases, but something good that has Olympus is that it's a technology that can be implemented in many scenarios. So if it is implemented, let's say, by the public administration, it will be the authoritative source already implementing this method for identification authentication, basically authentication purposes. And something that I wanted to add is that, in fact, Olympus offers, let's say, security on one side and privacy on the other. And there are different implementations because it offers security, and this is something I said during my presentation, because we have this distribution of the password, this password fragmentation, that requires an attacker to already compromise these several partial IDPs. So it hampers certain cyber attacks focus on these servers, so it solves this problem also of the single point of failure. And something I wanted to add is that this is something that is a line of further research to even if we are able to decentralize Olympus, that is to say, different legal entities are hosting partial IDPs, to ensure that, for example, the data stored in the IDPs, partial IDPs database can only be decrypted with the conjoined actions of everyone. This is, for example, something quite relevant that adds security and privacy at the same time. But in the end, well, we are talking about a technology on this point. So definitely I see a lot of implementations for it because it adds security and it can even add privacy depending on how we implement it. If it is the same entity hosting all the partial IDPs, of course, the privacy is limited. But this is, let's say, the possibility. It's a possibility for decentralization, avoiding the use of blockchain, something that I find quite relevant because it also avoids certain problems that have the blockchain. So it can be interesting for certain scenarios. But that was all from my side.
No, indeed. I mean, I wanted just to say exactly what Christina was saying in the sense regarding to your question has in the sense, because in the beginning, I mean, we already have this discussion about how to who provide the attributes, basically, in that sense. No? And that's why one of the idea was that the different virtual identity providers could manage different blocks of attributes of the user in some sense. And they, in that way that they don't cooperate, if you like, in order to collect all the information from the users in that sense. So in that sense, it will be similar to the idea of distributed attribute providers that could be managed by different, I was at authorities in some sense, no? Something that that really create the possibility to the user to be secure or be confident on that there's no cooperation between them in order to collect information of the end user, no? And in that sense, this linked very well to the question coming from Alberto. I think that he was saying about these new business models that we can have in Olympus, no, about this that the shift is toward more cooperation between the different stakeholders in some sense. Yeah, it is cooperation in the sense that they are obliged in some sense to cooperate, because no of them is going to have all the information about the users. So they need to really to be not cooperative, but at least they will not try to I would say create some kind of linkage between themselves in order to get all the information about the user. No? Also, one of the ideas that we don't mention at the beginning, and because of this is the technical part, is our design about the virtual IDP is allowed to work with that it's not necessary that all of them need to work at the same time in order to provide the solution of the authentication, but also can work n of number of them. So a less number of all the virtual ADP in order to provide also the solution. So there's a combination of technology there that we are using in order to facilitate the distribution, but at the same time the management of the privacy of the users in that sense. So that's why there's cooperation. They are obliged to cooperate, if you like, as the answer to Alberto.
So, Antonio, just giving you a time check. We have 5 minutes left,
yep.
And encourage all of our attendees. If you have any questions, please jump in. We have posted into the chat a questionnaire, a link to a questionnaire. Would be fantastic for you to please make sure that you check that out. And provide your feedback, as well as a link to where the slides that you saw today in the presentation will be available.
Yep, indeed. I mean, I wanted just to remind you that for us, it will be very helpful if you can provide, I will set this questionnaire, until next week. Because it's also will give us some. I mean, it's very simple. It's 5 to 10 minutes maximum. I was at 5 minutes to be filled. So we wanted to go just to the point, just to understand what relevant aspect of what we already have presented are important for you in that sense, and specifically if you identify, as we just mentioned, for example, of some of the discussion, possible areas, where you think this can be useful in the future from our side, so that if you provide your information, we can also contact you in the next days, so that we can discuss more carefully the details, technical details, but at the same kind of possible collaboration that we can have in the future. Because as I mentioned, this is also one of our objectives, is that, I mean, we will continue this because we have a new project where we are going to go all the direction to expand and continue the work. But also we would like to see more on the innovation part, so how we can apply this to very concrete scenarios.
Yeah.
There's a comment from Pascal. The same public sector could be a application field. Yes, a cumulative of collection of attributes to get social benefits. Yes, absolutely. This is, I think, what already Christina was also already mentioned, e-government services, and specifically that also was our interest, that any solution that we will provide should be interoperable, in that sense, to the eIDAS and now to the eIDAS 2, because at the end, that this is going to be a key factor on all the service provision by the government at European level. No? Christina, sorry, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just reading the comments. Yeah, indeed. I think it opens also new models, because it's, as I said, a distributed architecture, not decentralized. It can be decentralized if it's operated by different parties, and it can even open new ways to collaboration between public, private parties, something that I think that eIDAS is even opening with this regulation of the DLT. So well, definitely it's a good sector, but not only. We can even talk about collaboration or so well.
Policy support, policymakers support also. Because Gianmarco, sorry, I just said Gianmarco that is from GRC, and he was already mentioned the issue about the e-government. Not only about, it was Pascal mentioning about the public sector, and Gianmarco talking about the e-government services sector. So, for me, I just joined the two questions or the comments. I provide the answer to both of them.
Yeah,
okay.
And something that I would say that is quite good is that Olympus is still based on passwords. I know that nowadays there is a fight between passwords, biometrics, and so on. But at least from my point of view, as legal expert, biometrics, we have to be careful. So it's pretty good to increase the security of passwords through these mechanisms. And I would even recommend to study the possibility to integrate Olympus with other innovations that are focused on the user side, to prevent social engineering techniques, and we could get very, very resilient passwords. So this is just a comment, but I think it's interesting to have it into account.
I mean, it's password, the base, if the definition is based on password, but also we have demonstrated the use of multi-factor authentication also as a complementary to increase the security if needed in that sense. So it's not that it is mandatory to have only password. Okay. Okay, thank Pascal. Pascal is thinking, he said that he's thinking about the healthcare, no? Territorial integration along the passion journey. Yeah. I don't get very well what you mean with the passion journey. I mean, you mean when you move from one country to another, no? That's my understanding. Pascal, maybe you want to say something. You want to unmute?
Yes, I mean, the passion journey across the level of assistance.
Okay. No, across the cross border
outpatient, etc. Okay, so along this patient journey, you accumulate attributes, no, and in a sense they must be certificate by the medical doctors, and so you can collect them, and then maybe this authorizes you to get, for instance, authorization for invalidity, no money, no.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, pensions, these type of things.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the centralized originator of the information, of the attributes, and then the decision maker, the final decision maker that uses these attributes to authorize something, for instance, a benefit linked to the health care aspect of the person. Could be the equivalent of the financial contractors, for instance.
Yep. No, indeed. I mean, in some sense, also similar to the case of the COVID that Nuno was mentioned. No? You know, now one of the point was about, I mean, similar, not in a certain level, no, about how to collect certain information about what has been the process, no, that of the vaccination you have carried out, and then use part of this information in order to make decision on access to services or something similar. No? So it's, I think it's have some connection to this kind of a scenario that now are getting more and more, I would say, usual. I would say not because of the pandemic, but also because of this kind of new distributed scenarios.
I think that this type of distributed model works when the ecosystem is built in a way that the actors are willing to collaborate among them. This should be easier in principle in the public sector, no? Mm-hmm. Because they are mandated to collaborate.
They're mandated, yeah.
We hope.
Well,
so this this was my contribution to this brainstorming.
Many thanks. Yeah, perfectly. Okay, guys, because already it's 5 o'clock and we mentioned that we have 2 hours. Again, I would like to thanks, in this case, to SCY Studios, also in this case, the Jeff, and all my colleagues for being here. And obviously, my greatest thanks to you, to all of you, because you are really the one that are our objective here. And we wish you that if you can, please take a look to the webpage that I already mentioned, the questionnaire that you can to fill it, because for us it will be much more than interest to have your feedback, apart from the things that we already have discussed here, and we will take a note of them. And hopefully we can see you in the near future. Thanks again. Thanks, Geoff. Thank my colleagues, and see you then.
Antonio.
Sorry, the project is ending very shortly. I mean, next month, indeed. I mean, sorry for Pascal. So we are at the end. But I mean, as you already mentioned, we will continue. So it's not going to be the end of the history, just to be clear.
Thanks.
Okay, see you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.